And look at my lawn. Those are the neighbor's yellow fence, obviously. And that's their building. But look at that. Look at how beautiful. Look at the clouds moving. Look at how fast the clouds are moving. Look at the rain across the lake. I love it. I love it. I love being in Michigan. I got a little wet having to bring in my cushions. Okay, and it turns a little brisk out here, just a little bit breezy. Caught my arm on something over there. A lawnmower, I think. Oh. Ah. Ah. I wish I could just wish it away. Don't you? Chapter 2. New Opportunities. We are in the book. Who was Booker T. Washington? And this is somebody who didn't have a last name. He was only known as Booker, right? And yeah, slaves were separated from their families, all kinds of things. Once she was free, Jane took her family away from the Burroughs farm as soon as she could. They headed to Malden, West Virginia to join Washington Ferguson, Jane's husband. Now Jane, Booker, and John could finally live together as a family. Jane and Washington already had a daughter named Amanda, and they soon adopted another son, an orphan named James. There probably were a lot of orphans around that time, so that was probably pretty helpful. They had a small house in Malden. It was not fancy, but it was much nicer than their slave shack had been. Oops, I'm not showing you the pictures, am I? So there's the picture. Washington had been working in a Virginia coal mine. Once the family arrived in Malden, he took his stepsons with him to the mine. It was hard and dangerous work, and Booker did not like it. He said, "I do not believe that one ever experiences anywhere else such darkness as he does in a coal mine." There's a song I said, it's not Coal Miner's Daughter, it's Coal Mines in Harlem, or You'll Never Leave Harlem Alive, really, by Patty Loveless, I think. Really good song. Washington sometimes also worked in a salt works, a type of factory that boiled water to get the salt out of it. Once the water was removed, the salt had to be shoveled into huge barrels. John and Booker joined their stepfather in the difficult and dirty work of packing the barrels. When they were done, a manager put the number 18 on each one, which was Washington's worker ID number, and that was the first number Booker ever remembered learning. This way. He didn't have the advantage of my early birds classroom. Booker knew that a life in the coal mine or the salt works was not right for him. He remembered the schoolhouse from the Burroughs farm and knew that he wanted to have an education. Jane got him an alphabet book to learn his letters, but he wanted more. Not long after they arrived in Malden, a teacher named William Davis helped set up a small school for black children. There's William Davis right there. When he was 9, Booker was one of the first people to attend the school. He was grateful for the opportunity to learn, but his stepfather wanted to put a stop to it. Washington wanted Booker to keep working to help the family. Jane came up with a plan. Booker would work in the salt works from 4 o'clock to 9 a.m., then go to school. After school, he could return to work if they needed him at the salt works. It would take a lot of effort, but for Booker, it was worth it. So 4 to 9 a.m., he had to get up and work on the salt works. Hopefully, I know some people never see lightning. Maybe he'll see lightning. You'll have to look for it, though. because there's lots of clouds and it's light out, but you'll have to look for it. To make sure he got to school on time, Booker even changed the clocks at the salt works. He set them back so they were half an hour early. That way he could work until 9 and still get to school on time. The trick didn't last long, but it showed how much he wanted to be at school on time. Soon after he began school, Booker finally got a last name. Mr. Davis asked what Booker's father's name was, and the young was smart, and Jane had taught him to be clean and neat. He soon was given a room in the Ruffner house. Mrs. Ruffner slowly gave Booker more and more to do. He learned to clean the house and to keep track of the fruit and vegetables that she sold to her neighbors. Doing his chores improved his math skills. Mrs. Ruffner had been a teacher, so she added her own lessons to the ones Booker got at school. He was always willing to quit play for study, and he was more than willing to follow directions, she later wrote. That's pretty good, following directions for a young man. One of the most important things Mrs. Ruffner taught Booker was how to speak more clearly so that he could be understood. Many ex-slaves spoke with a slang with a southern accent that some white people had a hard time understanding. And because they did, they thought that black people were stupid. But that's wasn't the case. Mrs. Ruffner helped Booker to become confident enough to speak well in public. In addition to his job, Mrs. Ruffner, Booker sometimes worked in a coal mine to earn extra money. One day in the mine, he heard some of the men talking about the Hampton Institute, a school in Virginia for poor black students. Booker wanted to make every effort to continue his studies, and he thought the Hampton Institute might be just the place for him. Let me turn this a little bit. There we go. That'll be better, right? Chapter 3, A Home at Hampton. There we go. In September 1872, Booker left Malden and headed for Hampton Institute. He gathered up whatever money he could find and set off for the school, even though he had no definite idea where Hampton was. That seems like that's problematic. It turned out to be 500 miles from his home to the school in Virginia. Booker only had enough money to go part of the way by train. He took the next part of his journey by stagecoach and then began walking. He sometimes hitched rides in passing buggies. He stopped along the way at an inn where the owner would not let him inside because he was black. Booker knew that although slavery had ended, black people were treated as unfairly as ever. He stayed outside in the cold until the next morning when another stagecoach arrived. After weeks on the road, he reached Richmond, Virginia. He was out of money and still had not reached his goal, which was almost 100 miles away. Booker was determined, though, and found a solution. He slept outside and then found work to earn enough money to continue his journey. Booker arrived at Hampton tired, hungry, and dirty. He was asked to clean one of the classrooms as a test to see if he was a hard worker. Because Booker had plenty of experience cleaning Mrs. Ruffner, he did a great job in the classroom. The school welcomed him as a student. He got a job as a janitor to help pay for his schooling. Booker was overjoyed. He wrote later that he believed that a new kind of existence had now begun. Life would now have a new meaning. Since he had never had a real bed, he didn't know what to do with the sheets the school gave him. It took him 2 nights before he figured out how to put them on the mattress. Of course. While at Hampton, Booker studied math and composition, writing. He also spent time working on the school's farm, helping take care of the pigs. He studied biology and learned about animals and plants, but he loved his classes and public speaking the most. The leader of the Hampton Institute was a white former Union Army general named Samuel Chapman Armstrong, who had led black troops during the Civil War. General Armstrong was the founder of the Hampton Institute. He was a huge influence on Booker, who later called him more than a father. Booker also wrote, here's General Samuel Chapman Armstrong right there. Booker also wrote that there was something about armed. The organization of the school was similar to the daily army life. All students had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and clean up for inspection. Breakfast and morning prayers were followed by classwork until 3. Students then worked around the school or marched in drills until dinner. Then it was time for more schoolwork, prayers, and bed about 9:30 p.m. Samuel Chapman Armstrong, 1839 to 1893. Samuel Armstrong was born in Hawaii. His father had been a missionary there. After fighting at the Battle of Gettysburg on the side of the Union Army, he was given command of the Civil War Regiment of African Americans. They were called colored troops at that time. General Armstrong led the troops until the end of the war. Inspired by the missionary work he had grown up with, he wanted to educate his soldiers as well as lead them. When the war was over, Armstrong continued his dreams and, with the help of the American Missionary Association, established the Hampton Institute in 1868. He wanted to train black leaders to help other black people. While inspiring Booker T. Washington and many others, Armstrong ran Hampton until his death in 1839. Some black leaders felt that the school was not doing enough to teach the students more advanced subjects. Unlike white schools, Hampton did not teach Latin or Greek or philosophy or complicated sciences. White university students arrived at their school with much more knowledge than Armstrong students. The Hampton Institute began with simple and basic lessons. Some of those lessons taught students how to take care of themselves. Hampton stressed keeping clean and always looking nice. For his part, Booker took one of these lessons very seriously. I've watched carefully the influence of the toothbrush, and I am convinced that there are few things in civilization that are more far-reaching. I don't know. Booker's time at Hampton had a huge influence on his life. He wrote that it caused me for the first time to realize what it meant to be a man instead of a piece of property. That probably made him feel really good, don't you think? I do. The toothbrush, far-reaching because it allowed you to smile, it allowed you to approach people and have more confidence in doing it. So that's what the toothbrush does for people, right? And is it still raining? Just a little bit. Drizzling just a little bit. There's my little mouse friend. He goes back and forth here. I don't know what he does, but he goes back and forth over there. In 1874, Booker returned to Malden for a summer break. To help pay for another year at Hampton, he worked in the coal mines and even back in Mrs. Ruffner's house. While Booker was home, his mother, who had been ill for some time, died. Though he was greatly saddened, Booker knew that he had to continue his education, and he returned to Hampton. Booker graduated from the Hampton Institute with honors in 1875. He was 19 years old and had come a long way from the coal mines and slavery. He spoke in front of his classmates as part of the graduation ceremonies. A reporter from the New York Times attended the event and singled out Booker as the student who distinguished himself most. Chapter 4, The Teacher Teaches. We will be back here tomorrow at sometime. We'll see if I get all my work done and then I don't have to sleep in. I don't know. We'll see. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks for joining me in the reading room. This is the classroom. I'm the teacher. Thanks.